Rain fell in relentless sheets over the city streets, drumming softly against shop windows and umbrellas alike. Ethan hurried along the cobblestone path, his coat soaked and clinging to his shoulders. The evening had started with promise, a quiet walk after a long day at the office, but the sudden storm had turned it into a test of patience. He shivered slightly, pulling his collar higher, wishing he had prepared better for the weather. Ethan had always been cautious, measured in his steps and interactions. He liked order, the sense of control in small things. Yet tonight, despite the familiar routine of the streets and the predictable rhythm of the rain, he felt a small twinge of unease, an awareness of something unfamiliar just beyond his reach. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought as he ducked under the awning of a small cafe, hoping for a moment of shelter. That's when he noticed him. Liam stood just a few feet away, a figure partially hidden by the dim glow of the street lamp. His coat was dark, almost black, water beading on the shoulders. There was a calmness in the way he leaned against the wall, watching the rain rather than avoiding it. And when their eyes met, Ethan felt a sudden jolt, an unexpected pull he couldn't explain. Liam's gaze was steady, unhurried, and yet something in it made Ethan's chest tighten in a way he hadn't anticipated. Before Ethan could formulate a greeting, Liam stepped forward. "You're soaked," he said, his voice warm and inviting. Without waiting for a response, he shrugged off his own coat and held it out. "Here, take this. It'll keep you dry." Ethan hesitated. The gesture was simple, almost mundane, but the intimacy of someone offering comfort so unprompted made his heart race. He looked down at the coat, then back at Liam, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and something deeper he didn't yet understand. Thank you," he managed, his voice slightly shaky. Liam smiled, a small, genuine curve of the lips that seemed to chase away some of the evening's gloom. "No need to thank me," he said. "The rain is bad enough on its own. Might as well have someone look out for each other." As Ethan slipped into the coat, the fabric warm and slightly fragrant with Liam's scent, he felt an unusual comfort. It wasn't just the jacket, it was the intention behind it, the thoughtfulness of a stranger who had noticed him in a moment of vulnerability. He realized, almost reluctantly, that he was aware of every detail, the angle of Liam's shoulders, the way his eyes caught the light, the subtle tilt of his head as if listening even to the silence around them. They exchanged small talk, tentative and polite, yet the undercurrent of something more simmered beneath each sentence. Liam asked about the cafe, the weather, the city streets, and Ethan found himself opening up in ways he hadn't anticipated. There was an ease, a natural rhythm in the conversation, that made the rain and the chill almost irrelevant. He laughed more freely than he had in months, and he noticed Liam doing the same, quietly, thoughtfully, yet undeniably. Yet even as the laughter came, a small knot of awareness settled in Ethan's chest. He had a life, responsibilities, and connections that made this sudden connection feel like stepping into a world he had long kept at bay. He was drawn to Liam, undeniably, but there was caution too, a need to measure the steps before moving too quickly. When Liam gestured toward the street beyond the cafe, offering a shared umbrella, Ethan hesitated, caught between curiosity and hesitation. But the intrigue, the inexplicable pull toward this stranger, was too strong. He nodded, and together they stepped into the rain, their conversation continuing, their presence warming against the chill. For Ethan, the night had begun as a simple escape from routine. By the time they walked together into the misting city streets, it had transformed into something unexpected, a first thread of connection that promised complexity, warmth, and the hint of a story that had only just begun. And as he glanced at Liam, the jacket now resting snugly on his shoulders, he couldn't help but wonder how far this encounter might take him. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle by the time Ethan and Liam found themselves walking side by side along the glistening streets. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, creating a kaleidoscope of color that shimmered beneath their feet. Ethan's coat, Liam's gift, hung comfortably around his shoulders, a tangible reminder of the unexpected kindness that had sparked their connection. Ethan found himself stealing glances at Liam, noticing details he hadn't before, the slight curve of his smile when he spoke, the way his eyes seemed to linger on ordinary things with quiet fascination. There was a calm intensity in Liam, a presence that made the bustling city around them fade into the background. And the more Ethan observed, the more he felt a subtle pull, an inexplicable curiosity that made each step feel lighter. Even amidst the lingering chill of the evening, they talked as they walked, first about small, safe topics, the city, the rain, favorite cafes. But gradually, the conversation deepened. Liam spoke of his work at a local art gallery, describing exhibitions with such passion that Ethan could see the colors, the textures, the stories behind each piece through Liam's words. Ethan shared his own struggles at work, the long hours and the quiet moments of loneliness. Liam listened intently, nodding occasionally, letting Ethan speak without interruption. There was no judgment, only understanding, and it made Ethan feel a rare sense of being truly heard. As they passed a corner bookstore, Liam paused and gestured toward the window display. "Do you like poetry?" he asked. Ethan hesitated but nodded, drawn by the invitation to step further into Liam's world. Inside, the smell of old paper and coffee mingled with the faint warmth of the shop. They browsed quietly, occasionally sharing a line or a title that caught their attention. A simple gesture, a shared laugh over a clever verse, a hand brushing a book's spine, carried an intimacy that went beyond words. Ethan's mind, however, was not free from complication. He had relationships and routines, responsibilities that anchored him in ways that made sudden attractions feel perilous. Yet, with Liam, there was a sense of freedom, a space where vulnerability could exist without fear. Ethan found himself questioning why such connections felt so rare, why the warmth of a stranger's attentiveness could resonate so deeply. There was curiosity, yes, but also caution, a careful weighing of what was safe against what felt inevitable. They stepped back into the drizzle, the night around them quieter now, the city's pulse softened. Liam adjusted the umbrella so it covered them both, a small, effortless act of care. Ethan felt the brush of Liam's hand against his as they walked, a fleeting contact that sent a subtle ripple through him. It was innocent, perhaps accidental, yet the awareness of it lingered longer than expected. Words were exchanged in quiet tones, more about shared perspectives than surface-level conversation, and each word seemed to build a bridge of understanding between them. At one point, they paused at a street corner, the city stretching ahead like an open canvas. Liam turned to Ethan, a faint seriousness replacing the earlier lightness. "I don't usually do this, stop and talk to someone I just met," he admitted. "But, there's something about tonight. About you." Ethan's chest tightened at the confession, a mixture of excitement and fear that he hadn't felt in a long time. There was a magnetic quality in Liam's honesty, a vulnerability that mirrored his own, and it was impossible to ignore. For a moment, the rain, the lights, and the distant sounds of the city all disappeared. Ethan felt a connection that went beyond words, a subtle understanding that something meaningful was unfolding. The air between them held tension, unspoken yet electric, a promise of possibilities yet unexplored. And though Ethan knew he had to navigate his own fears and limitations, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward Liam, a pull that demanded attention, courage, and perhaps, a leap into the unknown. As they continued walking, their shadows stretching along the wet pavement, Ethan realized that tonight would not be easily forgotten. The jacket, the conversation, the shared moments of laughter and quiet introspection, all of it had created a bond that lingered even as the city hummed around them. And in that lingering warmth, he sensed that their story, just beginning, was already poised to challenge, transform, and awaken parts of him he had long kept hidden. The drizzle had finally eased into a gentle mist, and the city streets glimmered under the soft glow of streetlights. Ethan adjusted the coat Liam had lent him, feeling its warmth not just against the chill, but as a comfort he hadn't realized he craved. Each step beside Liam carried a strange mix of ease and tension, a push and pull that Ethan couldn't quite define, but felt deep in his chest. They arrived at a quiet park, where the distant hum of traffic was muffled by rows of trees and the gentle ripple of a fountain. Liam led the way, pointing out familiar paths and little details only someone who cherished the place would notice. Ethan followed, feeling simultaneously at home and unsettled. The vulnerability of sharing these moments with a stranger weighed heavily on him, yet he couldn't resist the magnetic pull between them. "I never expected tonight to turn into this," Liam admitted, his voice low, almost hesitant. He didn't finish the sentence, letting the pause linger. Ethan felt the weight of the unspoken words, the implication that the connection they shared was rare, perhaps fleeting. It was both thrilling and terrifying. Ethan's thoughts flickered to his own life, responsibilities, past relationships, moments of regret. He knew the risks of becoming attached too quickly, yet every instinct screamed that this encounter was different. There was honesty in Liam's presence, a purity of intention that made Ethan question why he had spent so long shielding himself from intimacy. They paused by the fountain, the water catching the light in tiny sparkles. Liam reached into his pocket and produced a small book of poetry, one he had mentioned earlier at the bookstore. "I thought you might like this," he said, handing it to Ethan. The gesture was simple, yet it carried a depth of thoughtfulness that Ethan couldn't ignore. He accepted the book, feeling the paper between his fingers as a tangible connection to Liam's world. For a while, they walked in silence, letting the misty air carry their thoughts. Ethan noticed the subtle ways Liam's presence affected him, the way he seemed to notice details others overlooked, the gentle steadiness of his voice, the warmth that radiated from his gestures. Every interaction deepened the bond, a slow, deliberate weaving of familiarity and trust, but the awareness of consequence lingered. Ethan's mind returned to the life he had paused for this evening, the people he cared for, the commitments he had made. Liam was a reminder of possibility, of a life lived with emotional openness, yet he also represented uncertainty. Ethan felt the tension between desire and caution, knowing that pursuing these feelings could bring both joy and complication. Liam broke the silence with a question, casual yet loaded with meaning. "Do you ever feel like something is pulling you towards someone, even when you know it's complicated?" Ethan looked up at him, surprised at the directness, but also relieved that his own thoughts weren't unique. "All the time," he admitted softly. "It's confusing. But somehow, it feels necessary." They shared a quiet moment, the park around them fading into insignificance. Ethan could sense the emotional gravity of the night, the choice between stepping forward into something uncertain or retreating to safety. And though no words described it fully, the tension between them was palpable. As the evening stretched on, Ethan felt a shift within himself. The hesitation, the careful walls he had built, began to soften under Liam's presence. He realized that connections like this were rare, moments where vulnerability, trust, and attraction converged into something unmistakable. And even if the path forward was uncertain, he couldn't ignore the pull that had guided him here. With a final glance at the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, Ethan felt a mixture of anticipation and resolve. Liam's hand brushed against his for a brief second, a fleeting gesture, yet charged with meaning. The moment lingered, suspended between possibility and hesitation, leaving Ethan aware that this night would mark the beginning of something unforgettable. As they walked back toward the streets, shoulder to shoulder under the misting rain, Ethan's heart carried both the weight of his choices and the promise of discovery. The story of tonight was far from over, and he knew that every step forward would test his courage, his heart, and his willingness to embrace the unexpected. The city had grown quiet under a thin veil of rain, its streets glistening under scattered streetlights. The hum of passing cars faded into the distance as Ethan Ward, 27, pulled his jacket tighter and crossed the empty avenue. His breath fogged in the night air, a faint reflection of the turmoil inside him. He told himself the pain in his chest was probably stress, too much coffee, too little rest, but the unease was heavier than that. Something about the night pressed on him, urging him toward the small illuminated sign ahead, "Night Clinic, Open." Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and rain-soaked coats. A flickering fluorescent light hummed above as Ethan approached the reception desk. The nurse behind it barely looked up. "Dr. Adrian will see you shortly," she murmured, handing him a clipboard. Ethan's pen trembled as he filled in his details, name, address, reason for visit. He paused over the last question, "Describe your symptoms." After a long moment, he simply wrote, "I can't breathe right. I feel too much." When the door to the examination room opened, the doctor appeared, tall, calm, and composed. Dr. Adrian Cole had the kind of presence that seemed to quiet everything around him. His voice carried warmth, but his eyes, sharp and searching, seemed to look straight through people. "Ethan Ward?" he asked. Ethan nodded, and the doctor gestured him inside. The room was small but tidy, divided by a white curtain that swayed gently from the air vent. Medical instruments gleamed softly on a tray, their orderliness oddly reassuring. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the steady rhythm of the wall clock. Dr. Adrian washed his hands, then turned, smiling faintly. "What brings you here at this hour?" Ethan hesitated. "Chest pain, I think. Or, maybe not pain. More like pressure. It comes and goes." The doctor leaned against the counter, studying him. "Any stress lately?" Ethan let out a quiet laugh, more bitter than amused. "Work's been heavy. Deadlines. Arguments at home. Maybe it's all just catching up." Adrian nodded slowly, his expression softening. "Sometimes the body speaks when the heart stays quiet," he said. The sentence lingered longer than it should have, landing somewhere deep in Ethan's chest. As Adrian took Ethan's pulse, his touch was careful, clinical, but human. Ethan could feel the steadiness of the doctor's hands against the tremor of his own. For a moment, he forgot the rain, the silence, the waiting. There was something strangely grounding about the way Adrian listened, not just to the beat of his pulse but to the pauses in his voice. "You're tense," Adrian said quietly. "Your pulse is fast, but not irregular. Let's take a closer look. Come with me, behind the curtain." The words were simple, yet they felt like an invitation into another kind of space. Ethan followed, the thin fabric brushing against his arm as he stepped through. The light dimmed slightly on this side, softer, more intimate. The rain's rhythm outside became a whisper against the glass. Adrian motioned for him to breathe deeply. In, and out. Good. Again. His tone was professional, but his attention was personal, focused. Ethan felt his heartbeat slow under that calm voice. "Do you live alone?" Adrian asked, adjusting the stethoscope. "No," Ethan replied. "With my partner. Mark. We've been together 5 years. Is he supportive?" Ethan hesitated again, a telltale silence filling the gap between honesty and habit. "Most days," he said finally. "Lately, I'm not sure." Adrian didn't press further. He simply nodded and stepped back, making brief notes on the chart. The room felt heavier now, not uncomfortable, but charged with something unspoken. When the doctor finally looked up, his expression carried something almost imperceptible, concern, maybe, or recognition. "Your vitals are fine," he said softly. "But you look like someone who hasn't been breathing freely for a while. Sometimes, it's not the lungs that need rest." Ethan met his gaze, uncertain how to respond. For a fleeting second, it felt as if the world outside that curtain didn't exist, just the faint smell of antiseptic, the low hum of electricity, and the quiet understanding between two strangers. Adrian scribbled the final note, then closed the file. "I'll prescribe something mild to help you sleep," he said, his tone measured again, back to normal. "But I'd also suggest talking, not to a doctor, necessarily. To someone who listens." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure who that someone could be. As he stepped out from behind the curtain, he caught his reflection in the small mirror on the wall, eyes tired, shoulders slumped, but a spark of something unfamiliar flickering behind them. "Doctor." Adrian stood by the desk, writing out the prescription. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Ward," he said quietly. Then, almost as an afterthought, added, "And if the pressure returns, come back. Even if it's late." Ethan left the clinic moments later, the rain easing to a mist. The air felt lighter, yet the conversation echoed in his mind, the voice, the eyes, the strange comfort of being seen. That he didn't know then that a single night's visit would unravel everything he thought he understood about loyalty, love, and himself.